Tonight's big story, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri says he has heard rumors that there may be plans to oust him as Senate President. Those allies threw their support behind him.
A new OCTA survey showed a majority of Filipinos now want the Philippines to rejoin the International Criminal Court and cooperate with the investigation into the war on drugs.
And local fishermen report that foreign fisherfolk, supposedly from China and Vietnam, are using cyanide to fish in the area, destroying corals and damaging marine life.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Angela Lagunzad Castro.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Big week and straight off to Congress we go. Senate President Mig Zubiri himself has confirmed that he has gotten wind of rumors of an ouster plot against him. These rumors have been circulating for some time now, and some senators are supposedly cooking up a resolution to unseat Zubiri. Who these are, we can't say for sure, but what Zubiri is sure of for now is that there are efforts to, as he says, discredit the Senate.
Alam mo naman, there's a concerted effort to discredit the Senate. Nalaman ko pa yan last week pa. So sa amin, trabaho lang kami. We'll know today. We'll know today if I give you a farewell dinner or not, right? But if not, then, let's continue working. It's important we continue working for the people.
Zubiri also said he's spoken to his fellow lawmakers, both from the minority and majority. All of them said wala silang nabalitaan tungkol dito.
Wala naman silang kausap. Wala naman silang nalalaman. Trabaho lang tayo para sa kapakanan ng taong bayan. Wala nang politika. Sino ba nanggulo? Hindi ko alam.
Good to see he's still in good spirits,
Yes.
despite the rumors of a coup.
Well, I would be in good spirits too. I mean, most of the other senators have spoken out against the supposed ouster. Pero ito nga, tanong ko sa inyo, kung may ouster plot at parte kayo, aaminin nyo ba? Sa
Of course
mga
not.
ambush interview.
That's a very good
course,
point.
of
Of course.
course
I mean,
not.
so
Of course
publicly,
not.
there have been a string of people throwing their support behind him. But you're
Yeah.
right. How would you know?
How would
right?
you know?
How would
Diba?
you know? This
No
is
one's
Game
gonna-
of Thrones nga, diba?
Exactly.
Oo. Tsaka-
But again, no, hindi ito yung unang beses na nagkaroon ng
Yes.
supposed ouster plot against Senate President Mig Zubiri. I think this is the third.
I was just gonna
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
last year.
Last year, March, June, di ba, regarding his stance on Chacha. So sabi nga nila, kung walang apoy, kung walang
No smoke,
no
no
smoke,
fire.
no fire.
Or where
You're
there's
right.
smoke, there's fire.
Funny, it's been a year, but you're right. Last year, initially it was about Chacha, kasi he said it's not a Senate priority, and then eventually it became about the Maharlika investment bill issue. So every time it seems like there's a huge issue dividing Congress, then what follows is there's coup rumors against the Senate president.
Pero okay,
right?
let's play a numbers game just for quote-unquote fun. There's only 24 senators. And
Yes.
so it
How
would
many
be,
would it take? Alam ko na where you're going.
Yes, just one more than half. So that would only mean 13 senators.
13 to make up a majority vote, right? So 13 out of 24 senators in order to vote out the Senate president.
But there is also a supermajority in the Senate.
Oh,
in
nga
fact,
eh.
our minority is at 2 senators, which is Coco Pimentel and
And
Rizal
Rizal
Tiveros.
Tiveros.
Yes. Well, ultimately, of course, the Senate president says his fate lies in the hands of his
colleagues.
His colleagues, right? As we were saying, 13 out of 24 it takes. But anyways, this is what he has to say.
I serve at the pleasure of my colleagues. I am extremely honored to serve at the pleasure of my colleagues. Ganun lang naman yan. I leave it to the wisdom of my majority.
Now, as we said, the senators we've spoken to so far have continued to express their support for Zubiri. Camille Samonte joins us with the rest of the story. Camille, what else do we know?
Angela, Zubiri's allies at the Senate continue to back the Senate President. Senate Majority Joel Villanueva and Senate Pro Tempore Loren Legarda says they still fully support Zubiri.
As far as I'm concerned, there is no leadership change. We support Senate President Mig Zubiri.
Yung timing medyo off, talagang off, we would say. But as far as I'm concerned and as far as the members of the majority na nakausap natin the past 24 hours, talagang we're all solidly behind our inspirational leader, Senator Mig Zubiri. And we feel na walang mas deserving at this point in time to lead the Senate other than our Senate President Mig Zubiri.
As you mentioned, there were also talks in March and June last year of supposed ouster plots against Zubiri over charter change. This is the reason why Senator J.V. Ejercito believes there are still those who wish to divide the Senate due to issues surrounding the People's Initiative.
Siyempre, meron tayong hindi pinagkakasundo sa House, so hindi malamang, divide and conquer siguro para, dahil nagbabanggaan yung dalawang House Hindi malayo na talagang magkakaroon ganito mga intriga. Pero sa ngayon, palagay ko mahirap palitan si Senate President Mig Zubiri.
Senator Amy Marcos also remains fully supportive of Zubiri. She notes no one in the upper chamber even wants to take over the position.
Okay naman siya. Ang pangit nga ng trabaho niya, wala nga may gusto. Sa totoo lang, walang may gusto na maging Senate President. Ang hirap ng trabaho, naiipit ka lagi.
Senator Jinggoy Estrada is among those rumored to replace Zubiri. But even Estrada says, tutol siya na magkarigo doon sa Senado.
May mga kasamahan daw kayo, sir, na kayo po yung parang napipili na...
I don't know. I haven't talked to a single senator about it.
Angela, members of the majority also emphasize that it is better to just focus on their jobs in making the lives of Filipinos better and be united to protect the institution. Angela?
Thanks so much, Camille. You have to remember there are 3 names that came out sa pinag-uusapang ouster plot na to. We have Senator Loren Legarda, Senator
Jinggoy Estrada.
Jinggoy Estrada and Senator Grace Poe.
Na potentially might
take over Senator Zubiri.
Pero parang maraming rumors is si Senator Jinggoy Estrada.
Jinggoy,
Because last year, when there were coup rumors against Senate President Zubiri, his name also came up then. But again, what we're saying is these are
all
unverified at this
speculations.
point. These are just what we've been hearing, and these are unverified.
Yeah.
Only time will tell, I
But
guess.
earlier on our evening program on 1PH sa Totoo Lang, Senator Nancy Binay also said she's not heard of any plans to out Zubiri, and that for her, he's still the best person to serve as Senate President.
At this point, para sa akin, he is still the best person to serve as the Senate President. Lalong-lalo na ngayon na meron kaming laban na hinaharap. Pare-pareho kami ng sentimento na mukhang strategy talaga to divide and conquer. Strategy ng mga nagsusulong sa PI.
Alright, cambio naman tayo sa ibang topic. While inflation has eased this 2024, at least in the month of January, there's still at least 3 out of 4 Filipinos who are unhappy with the government's efforts to rein in prices. A December survey from OCTA Research Group showed that 75% of respondents are dissatisfied over the government's response to inflation. The survey also showed that at least a third of respondents are unhappy with the government's efforts to reduce poverty, to ensure food security, and generate jobs.
Kahit na bumaba yung inflation rate, but 4% pa rin siya. So it means tumataas pa rin yung presyo ng bilhin. And yan yung nararamdaman ng mga ating kababayan on the ground. We also need long-term solutions sa ating mga problema. Yung pagbibigay ng ayuda, it's a solution, but it's also a short-term solution. Hindi naman natin pwedeng forever na, papakainin.
And on the flip side, a majority of Filipinos were actually satisfied when it comes to infrastructure projects. 8 out of 10 OCTA survey respondents welcomed the Marcos Jr. administration's Build Better More program. More than 70% also approved of the government's disaster response and its healthcare and education projects. In response, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said that the Marcos administration is accelerating its efforts to manage price increases of basic commodities such as rice in light of the El Niño phenomenon. Meanwhile, a separate OCTA survey released over the weekend showed that more than half of Filipinos are in favor of the government cooperating with the ICC, or International Criminal Court's drug war probe. 55% are in favor, to be exact. In addition, nearly 6 out of 10 want the Philippines to rejoin the ICC. Support was strongest among respondents in what they call balanced Luzon and among socio-economic classes A, B, C. OCTA's findings match those of a similar poll recently conducted by the Social Weather Stations or SWS.
Here to help us break down these big numbers from the survey, we have Professor Ranjit of the OCTA Research Group joining us tonight. Thanks for being with us again, Professor Ranjit.
Thank you, ladies, for inviting me, and good evening to all our televiewers.
Okay, let's get right into it. These are very big numbers, in my opinion. No matter which way you slice and dice them, the message remains that support for the ICC is gaining ground in the Philippines. We're talking about 59% in favor of rejoining the International Criminal Court and 55% in favor of cooperating with the ICC's investigation into former President Duterte's bloody war on drugs. Talk us through these numbers. I mean, I was surprised, but were you? And what's the significance here?
Yes, honestly, I was surprised with the numbers. A nuance that I want to emphasize is that this is a fourth quarter survey. This was a survey conducted across the nation from December 10 to 14. So it's it's hopefully by the end of Feb or early March, we'll have a new first quarter survey that will validate this baseline survey we conducted last year. So that's the first thing I want to say. Number two is that before we asked them the question, we gave them an explanatory card that explained what the ICC was and its relevance to protecting rights, as well as, of course, the fact that we have bolted. We are not anymore part of the ICC, and therefore we asked the question: should we rejoin? And so these were the findings. 5 out of 10 Filipinos, 6 out of 10 Filipinos want to rejoin the ICC. And second question we asked our interviewees was: should the government cooperate with the ICC's ongoing investigation into drug-related killings during the Duterte administration? And the answer was above 50%, 55% to be exact. And it was significant. There was significant support across regions. That means across balanced Luzon, the National Capital Region, Visayas and Mindanao, and across socioeconomic classes, Class A, B, C, Class D, and Class E.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my second question. Do they understand what the ICC is, you think, and the reason for former President Duterte pulling the country out of the ICC before? Because 2019, I think, was the year that we terminated our membership in the court, and at that time, it was over questions of sovereignty, right? Because we didn't believe that the administration at that time didn't think that the international court should have any say in our internal matters, is what they used to say. But the respondents in your survey, they understood what the ICC did and why we pulled out in the first place?
Now, we didn't explain that part. What we did was to explain the ICC, its basic function, and the fact that we are not members of the ICC anymore, and we focus on asking them the basic question: should we rejoin? So, as so many of our colleagues have also suggested, an even longer explanatory card. But I think it is validated by the SWS survey. When you look at the SWS survey on awareness, which is quite robust as far as this question is concerned. So we had a different way of asking, a different set of questions and a different way of asking the questions. We didn't assume awareness. We had to give it. We have to make sure. We had to make sure that our interviewers were aware of this basic fact. Okay, we did not include the reasons why we bolted out in our explanatory card. What we did was provide the basic information about the ICC, about its role in protecting the rights of individuals, and ask our interviewees if we should rejoin such an organization.
All right.
So this was the basic frame that we utilized.
Okay. Professor Ranjit, looking at your numbers, so to nitpick, this one jumped out at me. Obviously, the highest came from Balance Luzon, which is at 65%, but Mindanao, lowest, but it's at 42%, which jumps at me as rather high, given, the solid Mindanao support behind President Duterte back in 2016, or in the run-up to the elections, and still after that. What do these numbers say? Is the wind changing?
I think it's important for us not to read beyond what the data is already providing us. It basically argues two things. One is that the government should cooperate with the ongoing investigation of the ICC on drug-related killings that happened during the last administration. It does not mention anything about President Duterte in jail or the Duterte influence as far as this issue is concerned. We have no data on that. A second thing that comes out of the probe is that people want us to rejoin the ICC. So I guess those are the two major findings out of this. Anything beyond that is really not supported by the data that we have at the moment. It doesn't talk about the implication of, let's say, a warrant of arrest or arrest, the implications of an arrest, impending arrest on President Duterte. That might have yielded a different result altogether, but we don't have that as far as our survey is concerned. All we have is really survey questions that were relevant to the question raised by President Marcos in December last year in his attempt then to study whether we should rejoin the ICC and whether we should cooperate as far as the investigation was concerned. Of course, today, in February, that position has been clarified by a change of position of the president on this issue. Nonetheless, should the government need data on this particular issue? Now it does have that on hand. Not just OCTA's data, but also SWS, which validates each other's findings in a sense.
I want to go dun sa economic survey, Professor. Anything new you've seen compared to previous surveys?
Well, okay. So what have we seen since the fourth quarter? One is that there's a continuing downward trend, not very significant, but it's continuing to go downward as far as self-rated poverty is concerned. But hunger went up significantly in the last quarter of the year. What else did we find out? No? That most Filipinos are satisfied with, government's programs for infrastructure development, health and education, taking care of our OFWs, disaster response. But most of the public are extremely dissatisfied, with only 6% satisfied. That's more than 75% are dissatisfied with government's efforts to manage the inflation. They're also dissatisfied with the anti-poverty initiatives of government, and basically all those programs that focus on helping the poor. So that's the third thing we found out from the fourth quarter surveys. No, on the other hand, also released by OCTA last week, optimism is still high as far as people's perception of the government and governance is concerned. When you look at answers to the question, is the country moving in the right direction? 6 out of 10 Filipinos think the country is moving in the right direction. But of course, it's much lower than, let's say, 3 quarters ago. No. On the whole, these are some of the impressions we got in the fourth quarter. That people are suffering from the high inflation, in the sense that they're not able to access enough food, so that hunger went up. But despite that, they continue to be hopeful, and they continue to articulate to government that it should do better in terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of providing access to cheap food, no, and provide higher paying jobs if possible. No? So people are speaking to the surveys. They're suffering. They're asking government to answer or provide solutions to their most urgent needs, no, for jobs, for higher wages, no, for access to cheaper foods, for a solution to high prices. And they're showing it in our various surveys on performance and satisfaction. So these are some of the important or notable findings from the fourth quarter survey.
How do we reconcile that, though, Professor? On the whole, people feel like the country is still headed in the right direction, at least on the economic front. But as you pointed out, on the other hand, there is a very strong response to the questions around inflation. How do we reconcile that? Is this, I remember in the time of President Duterte...
Filipinos are basically optimistic as a people. Now, we see it survey after survey.
Okay.
They're suffering really hard. And when you look at the hunger situation, it's gone up at least 5 points, and it's when you look at that and you look at the bickering within the political class, it's almost criminal. They're actually fighting over parochial concerns, and concerns that are not important to the everyday Filipino. When you look at our last survey results of urgent personal and national concerns, charter change is only supported by 1% of our population.
All right.
And people are suffering. People are hungry, and that is this is the fourth quarter, and the first quarter of this year is almost over. I can only imagine how bad the numbers will actually be, in this quarter. So we expect it to, to regress even more, because of the situation, or it could also improve. We're hoping it will improve. So the government's work. The government has to focus on resolving these issues. They're very important issues. And this political bickering in front of the people, I don't think is going to be good, for trust and approval of our top government officials. We all believe that in OCTA that everybody's going to take some sort of a hit.
Right.
Because
Professor,
of this,
speaking of that, how do these results from the fourth quarter survey, quality of life as well as optimism, stack up against the approval and trust rating survey results in that same period?
Okay, so you'll see that everybody has to understand this was the second week of December. People are generally more optimistic in the second week.
So that's
Then in the first
context
week, it's our
there.
fault, We normally should be taking it the first week, but all the other survey companies were doing their own surveys already, and OCTA wanted to do
hence the
something
optimism.
different, cross-validate what the other top two survey companies are doing, which all of them did in the first week of December. So we decided, okay, let's contribute to the longitudinal analysis by doing it in the second week. And the tendency in the second week is to be extremely optimistic, nearing Christmas. So maybe that's partly what it was. And when you look to answer your question, everybody went up, except for the Supreme Court Chief Justice, everybody went up. The president's numbers rebounded as far as trust and performance is concerned. VP Sara continues to be the most trusted and best performing public official in the country. It's incredible. Despite the controversy and everything, Speaker Martin Romualdez had an uptick in his numbers. He's now above 60% as far as our survey is concerned. And so is Senate President Mig Zubiri, who I feel should not be replaced because his trust and approval numbers are above 60% as far as OCTA is concerned. So there should be no reason why we should change him as far as people's perceptions are concerned, So,
That's if people listen to the
generally
data.
speaking, the fourth quarter was good for our top government officials.
And then historically, the next round of surveys, are they typically a more downbeat for everyone all around?
We're only 3 years old. OCTA is only 3 years old. But yeah, it tends to be that way in the first quarter. Everybody takes a hit. Everybody's post-Christmas, mindset is gone. Reality has set in. And we're hoping that the prices will continue to go down and continue to be felt by the majority of our population. We do see some glimmer of hope because self-rated poverty continues to be on a downward trend. And it's not going up. It remains stagnant, but the trend is going down. So we're seeing some hope there. Maybe the expansion in the economy in the fourth quarter must have helped. Joblessness, by the way, again, I forgot to say this, is down as far as OCTA surveys are concerned. So unemployment, it's still a problem, but it's less of a problem in the fourth quarter. The economy expanded seemingly, but as we now know, it missed the mark. But still, it created some effect as far as the job situation is concerned.
Real
It's
quick,
largely positive.
real quick, Professor. The back to the ICC survey. Are you going to do a follow-up one, maybe in a quarter, or is that a one-off?
No. We're doing a follow-up. A lot of the decisions are going to be made this quarter. So we're running another survey in late Feb, early March, and so hopefully we'll be able to provide your network a copy of the results.
We look forward to that, Professor. And my personal request is baka nga we need to provide more of context around ICC because it's startling to me how much of a change in sentiment there has been. There was a time under former President Duterte's time that everyone, it seemed, was against the
against
ICC.
it.
Everyone thought they were encroaching on our sovereignty, on our jurisdiction, and now suddenly 59% want us to rejoin, which is very startling to me. And I think maybe perhaps there's an opportunity there to provide more context. And also,
I agree. And but my basic position is there are two survey firms of good reputation.
Yeah.
By the way, that includes us now.
That does. That's very true.
Who are validating, of different periods, validating, and this is the power of surveys.
Yeah.
If you're asking almost the same question and almost at the same period, you'll probably get the same answer.
Right.
And while we ask largely, different questions to some extent, they're also the same to a great extent. No, they validate each other.
Yeah.
And this is why the result is quite powerful. And to use your words, we were all startled by it also. So hopefully we'll structure better questions in the next round.
Thank you for validating me.
More focus on awareness. Thanks to your own advice, okay? But yeah, that's true. It's a valid question. Awareness should be measured more effectively, and so we're gonna reframe some of the questions on awareness.
Okay.
Thank you.
But for now, we're going to have to leave that there, and we look forward very much to the next iteration of your survey. That was OCTA Research Fellow Professor Ranjit Rai. Thanks so much.
Now, up next, the National Security Council expresses concern over BFAR's report that foreign fishermen are using cyanide to fish in Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal. The details when we return. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources of BFAR caused a stir over the weekend when they reported that foreign fishermen were using cyanide in Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal. BFAR officials said that Chinese and Vietnamese fishermen were doing this to, quote, intentionally destroy Bajo de Masinloc and prevent Filipino fishers from accessing their traditional fishing grounds. But the Philippine Coast Guard has yet to confirm this, and the National Security Council also said the report needs to be validated first.
We are alarmed by this development na nangyayaring ito. But, you know, partner, we have to be careful also. So we have to validate and investigate.
Now, meanwhile, what the PCG, or Philippine Coast Guard, was able to confirm is that the Chinese Coast Guard has removed the floating barriers that they put up in the Bajo de Masinloc. Now, up until a few days ago, satellite image showed that the barriers were still there at the mouth of the shoal. Assistant National Security Council Director Jonathan Malaya says that the Chinese Coast Guard dismantled these barriers themselves.
Well, ang nangyari dyan is noong umalis na yung ating BFAR vessels, no? Tinanggal na rin nila. Okay. So habang nandun yung ating BFAR vessel, nandun yung barrier. Pero immediately after ng pag-alis ng BFAR, tinanggal na rin nila. No? Siguro natatakot na rin silang putulin.
Oo, di ba naalala ko, pinutol nyo yan.
So ito na nga, no? Nagbili na nga si National Security Council sa Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources na kumuha daw, mag-collect ng evidence to be able to prove, no, kung talagang may cyanide fishing happening in the area.
Because then that's environmental damage, causing environmental damage.
Kasi it's one way that you can say it na merong gumagamit ng cyanide, but it's another also
to prove it. Yeah, that's
diba?
right. I mean, did you actually see them blast
Although sabi nga ng BFAR
cyanide,
and also PCG na if you take a look at the coral reef in Bajo de Masinloc, talagang destroyed siya, damaged na. But yun nga, wala pang evidence na talaga nakikita mo ba yung Vietnamese fishermen are naghagis ng cyanide there.
Correct.
So that they have to get.
Tsaka yung sinasabi, yung intentional, yun yung sinabi ng mga Filipino fishermen, intentional na masira. Pero cyanide fishing, it's a, you know, an ancient, like a, hindi naman ancient, pero old problem, old method of fishing.
So, is Scarborough Shoal becoming a geopolitical flashpoint once again? As always, when we need some hard answers, we call in our fellow One News host, Richard Heydarian, who's also a political analyst and senior lecturer at the UP Asian Center. Sa hirap naman, no? That's a big, hard question to answer, no? How are you, Richard?
I'm good. Sana meron din kayong vlogger influencer as one of my
supermodel.
We'll add it next time. But yeah, your thoughts on what's going on at the Scarborough at Bajo de Masinloc. I mean, we were tackling two stories just now. First, potential. I underscore the word potential cyanide fishing. And then also the dangerous maneuvers which happened several days ago, supposedly by the Chinese Coast Guard, and also the floating barriers, which as of tonight, as far as we know, has been taken down. But still, again, these like small incidents. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, unang-una, I think this is a good reminder that we're facing multiple ticking time bombs there in the West Philippine Sea. Of course, the Ayungin Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, took a lot of our attention over the past 6 months or so because of the multiple incidents, the water cannoning, the disruption of our resupply mission, our hopes to fortify our position there without triggering any kind of conflict with China. But let's not forget, there's also the Reed Bank situation. We still don't know what are we going to do about it. Are we going to develop the resources there? And then not to mention Scarborough Shoal, no? Which is the beginning essentially of, you know, a new era in Philippine foreign policy. I mean, after the incident in Scarborough in 2012, the Philippines has not been the same in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of domestic discussion, in terms of awareness of what's happening in West Philippine Sea. Now, going back to this, of course, I defer to the officials to confirm whether, you know, what's being reported is the case. But if ever it turns out true, I mean, it's not totally shocking or surprising, right? Because remember back in the day, during the Duterte administration, there were reports by some media channels and journalists about, you know, Chinese maritime forces or fishermen doing something, you know, very destructive to our environment. In fact, there was a study by the the Marine Sciences Institute in UP a few years ago that put the ecological environmental damage conservatively at hundreds of millions of dollars annually. So I think this is just if ever true, or even if it's not true, the reality is that we're facing a very difficult condition there in the Scarborough Shoal. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned Vietnam also may have been involved in this. I think that's another thing that we have to keep in mind because the Vietnam aspect is very important. As you know, President Marcos was just in Vietnam the other week. We discussed maritime security cooperation. We discussed building a common front within ASEAN and beyond ASEAN in dealing with China on a unilateral front. But we also know that, Vietnam also has some overlapping claims with us. And the Vietnamese fishermen have been entering our waters. And there were some deadly incidents in the past. I think 2017, there was an incident between Philippine Navy and the Vietnamese fishermen. So it's not only China, it's also Vietnam, except it's not at the same level. The kind of harassment we're facing from China, the 9-line claim of China is incomparable to what Vietnam is doing. So what that means is I won't be surprised some pro-China elements in the Philippines and propagandists will try to exaggerate any Vietnamese angle possibly to what's happening in the Scarborough Shoal or beyond. So that's the other thing I'm also watching out for right now.
Well, for now, no, Richard, just to clarify for all our viewers, it was a statement of the Filipino fishermen in Bajo de Masinloc. They said allegedly it was Chinese and Vietnamese fishermen, and I think authorities are busy trying to verify that as well as the cyanide fishing accusations as well. But what do you make of that barrier removal? Is that kind of China taking a step back and saying, well, if people do see a barrier, maybe they'll really pin us as the bad guys here? Was it something like that, maybe?
Yeah, I think the Chinese are still scratching their head and scrambling for a response to the Philippines kasi itong proactive transparency initiative ng Philippine Coast Guard, itong mga madaldal natin mga kaibigan na spokesman ng Philippine Coast Guard, the mga others. This is something very shocking to China. I think they've been struggling. Last time I checked, I think even the Twitter account of Philippine Coast Guard was hacked or something, and there was an accusation that some friends maybe from the other side were involved in this. So I think China is really struggling. In fact, I saw some of the commentaries in China recently in some of their newspaper where some Chinese experts are suggesting that it's time for them to show their sword. That's the terminology that they're using. So I'm absolutely certain that there are very vehement debates within the Chinese maritime forces establishment on how to best deal with the Philippines because they're looking for their own Goldilocks approach, right? They want to be tough and strong enough to impress their own people and dissuade the Philippines. At the same time, I think the Chinese also are wondering, you don't want to give the Marcos administration even more reasons to fortify its relationship with the United States and give more reasons to Japan, Australia, and the US to come to the picture. So it's a very delicate balancing act also on the part of China. But one thing that I think all of us have to keep in mind is that not the black swan, but the gray rhino here is the role of militia forces and some Chinese fishermen who may not necessarily be doing things on the command of the Chinese military or officials. So there's some rogue elements there, including perhaps the one who was behind the Reed Bank incident in 2019. If you remember, we still don't know exactly what happened there. It looks like a Chinese militia was involved in that, and we don't know how much of command structure following and compliance is happening there. So actually, one thing we're very worried about is crazy rogue activities by militia forces or, let's say, overzealous fishermen from other rival claimants there. And it takes just one lethal incident or fatal accident for things to get out of control, especially given how tense things are right now.
Now, PBBM urging, continuing, urging BFAR and PCG's presence in the waters, in our territory. Sa tingin mo ba, Prof, this will stir tension? Tama ba na magsalita siya ng ganon on his part right after the recent incident?
Well, I think this is a new era for the Philippines in terms of, maturation. Let's be honest, ang gulo ng foreign policy natin. Minsan beshi tayo ng China, minsan ayaw natin sa China. So now finally, I think the Philippines is trying to draw the line and say we have no problem with diplomacy with China, which is exactly the position of President BBM. He has had multiple conversations with Xi Jinping and Chinese leadership over the past year or so. But there has to be red lines, and the Philippines has to gain the respect of China, of course, grudgingly, by standing its ground. It's not going to be riskless, but it's part of the maturation of our maritime strategy in this part of the world. I mean, if you look at all our officials from National Security Council, from the Philippine Coast Guard, among others, of course, as a West Philippine Sea so-called experts, I deal with these people, and I'm very impressed by their learning curve, and I'm also impressed by how proactive they have been. Again, this is not riskless, but let's not forget, we are doing this because we are being bullied. So let's not gaslight ourselves. You know, this is the problem. A lot of strategic gaslighting is happening. Philippines is being blamed when in fact we're just defending what is ours. And China's 9-dash line has no basis in international law.
The maturation of our West Philippine Sea strategy, I love that. But if you think the strategy in the past several years has been confusing, what's one thing you'd like to see clearly? Let's pretend that the president is watching right now. What's one thing you would ask for?
Oh, he is watching. I'm just kidding. No. I mean, for me, there's still room for improvement. I don't want to lose the opportunity of interviewing someone. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, the thing is, sometimes, some officials, I think, are kind of, maybe they have the midterm elections in mind, right? I think there's some officials there who are kind of compensating for their total silence during the Duterte years. Okay, I'm not gonna name names, but I think, medyo hinay-hinay lang tayo. Let's leave this to the DFA. Let's leave this to the National Security Council. Let's leave this to the Philippine Coast Guard. Let's leave this to the president, right? And as I said before, I'd rather have the DFA and the president take a lead rhetorically on this. And as much as I think National Security Council and PCG are doing a good job, but I think the problem sometimes is that there are a lot of people who are trying to, I don't know, it kind of comes off as grandstanding, right? And compensation for their past silence. But again, for me, it's part of the maturation process, right? You're gonna make mistakes. There's gonna be some, excesses here and there. But I'm generally optimistic about the direction of Philippine policy. Having said that, as I always said, you have to prepare for contingency. Things could get ugly, and I won't be surprised. China will indeed show its sword, kumbaga, metaphorically, if not figuratively, at some point, just to test how much the consensus in the Philippines holds. Because the consensus, as you talk also to our good friend, say, Professor Rai from OCTA, if you look at almost all key surveys, they show that majority of Filipinos want us to take a tough stance against China. I'm sure there's some in China saying, tignan nga natin kung matapang talaga sila, i-test nga natin yung limits nila. So this is where things are going to get tricky, and that's why we have to be prepared, not only operationally, but also in terms of propaganda. Because a lot of our pro-China friends in the Philippines are ready to exaggerate anything to instill fear and diffidence into the heart of the Filipino people. I'm not saying it will work, but I'm saying we have to be prepared for that.
I get what you're saying, because sometimes all that noise just does nothing but muddy the water, essentially, right? So it sounds like we're all over the place. We're going to have to leave that there for now, but as always, thanks so much for your insights. That was Richard Heydarian, political analyst and senior lecturer at the UP Asian Center, One News host, and also social media influencer. Thank you.
Blogger.
Social media influencer and blogger. Thank you so much.
Because I thought we'll talk about Prabowo, TikTok, Indonesia, and all. Like,
Next time.
Because I wanted to show my TikTok expertise. But thank you very much. As always,
see. We'll book you again next time. We're going to have to pause for a very quick one right now, but right after that, the DOJ says it can now issue a lookout bulletin against alleged sex offender Pastor Apollo Kibuloy, although they can't prevent him from leaving the country. The details when we return. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
Right, another big story today. A former follower of Pastor Apollo Quiboloy told the Senate that former President Rodrigo Duterte and his daughter, the Vice President Sara Duterte, received, quote, bags of guns from the religious leader. The witness, only identified as alias Rene, says that he worked as a landscaper for Quiboloy and witnessed this transaction himself. Rene said this took place in Glory Mountain, a 21-hectare property belonging to the Kingdom of Jesus Christ in Davao City.
Minsan po pumupunta din po doon si former President Rodrigo Duterte at former Mayor, Davao Mayor Sara Duterte. At pag umaalis na po sila doon sa Glory Mountain, dala na po nila yung mga bag, na siya pong bag na nilalagyan po ng mga baril.
Okay, so we don't really have exact details on where this property is exactly, pero sabi do, chopper daw ang sinakyan ng mga Duterte papunta sa Glory Mountain. Actually, Rappler had a report and they said that this Glory Mountain supposedly is somewhere along the slopes of Mount Apo, the highest peak here in the Philippines. At dito daw, dinadala ang mga miyembro na kailangang iwasto ang ugali. News 5 showed this exclusive footage of a supposed sanctuary of former President Duterte, and alias Rene confirmed that this indeed was part of Glory Mountain. No confirmation, though, what the guns received by Duterte are for, but we know that the Duterte-Quiboloy friendship goes way back when former President Duterte was still mayor of Davao City. Okay, punta naman tayo dun sa story ni alias Rene. Kitang-kita natin, nanginginig pa yung mga kamay niya habang binabasa ang kanyang salaysay. He supposedly was given a scholarship, but ang ending ay panlilimos sa lansangan. Ang quota niya, 3,000 pesos per day. And if he does not hit his quota, there is a punishment. So mas matindi daw yung pressure during Burr month. So from September to December, the quota is as high as 1.5 million pesos. Nakaranas din si alias Rene ng pangmomolestya mula sa mga matataas na opisyal ng Kingdom of Jesus Christ. And he also worked as a researcher of SMNI without pay. So sa umaga, researcher sa SMNI, sa gabi, nanlilimos. At nung hindi na niya nakayanan at umalis siya, ay nakatanggap siya ng mga threats.
Nagpanggap po akong pipi at bingi. Kung hindi ko po ito maabot, ay papaluin po ako at di pa ako papakainin. Nawag daw ako magsasalita tungkol sa kingdom, anong mga nalalaman ko, especially sa mga nakita ko sa Glory Mountain. Kung hindi, ipapakulong daw ako at mawawala ako dito sa mundo.
So it was not just alias Rene, may nagsalita rin na alleged grandson ni Quiboloy, alias David naman, na nagtrabaho din daw bilang cameraman sa SMNI at nakaranas din ng torture. Pakinggan natin yung sinabi niya.
Nung nilagay nila ako sa Bartolina, 14 po kami magkakasama. Tinorture nila kami, nilagyan nila kami ng sili sa mata, inuntog nila yung ulo ko.
And on the flip side, ito naman ang isang depensa ng isang full-time miracle worker ng Kingdom of Jesus Christ. Pakinggan natin.
As full-time miracle workers of the Kingdom of Jesus Christ, because this is a religious organization, a corporation soul, so we don't have salary, but we call them honorarium. We are serving because this is voluntary, this is being a missionary, so this is not actually employment.
So this is the second installment of that hearing. Medyo matagal before itong second episode.
I got a glimpse of the hearing kanina at sinabi nga nito ni alias Rene na sometimes napapasweldohin siya ng 200 to 300. And then Senator Risa asked him kung ano ba itong sweldo na to, lingguhan ba yan o monthly ba yan? Sabi niya, depende po sa mood niya.
So parang balabalato lang.
Oo, parang
But these are grave, serious accusations, that especially that part of may quota siya and he has to go beg for it. Yun yung matagal ng problem of syndicates, right?
And there's
in the
punishment. If you don't hit your quota, torture, molestation, these are, you're right, Reg, really big accusations. And that's why Senator Risa Ontiveros says na malinaw daw na meron talagang human trafficking and labor exploitation even with SMNI because he was working as a researcher by day without pay as well. Senator Risa was calling on the DOJ and the DOLE to inspect.
The problem is, Pastor Apollo Kibuloy was a no-show at this hearing once again. Kaya pinasabina na siya. And what happens is once you're subpoenaed and you don't show up, the sergeant at arms can actually go and arrest you, right? As we saw in previous Senate Blue Ribbon hearings. The DOJ, we also know at the hearing said that they can now issue what's known as an ILBO, Immigration Lookout Bulletin Order, but this does not allow them to detain Kibuloy, right? If he shows up at the immigration counter, they'll only check his itinerary. They'll ask him questions about where he's going, but they can't stop him from leaving the country.
And another thing to note, I think, with this whole thing is that today lang nagkaroon ng subpoena for Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. Matagal na itong hinihingi ni Senator Risa Ontiveros kay Senate President Mig Zubiri. And I think he only promised some 3 days ago or before the weekend na, sige, pipirmahan ko na. So a lot of people are also questioning, bakit ngayon lang?
Right. Well, he's fighting off cool rumors.
Chacha and all that. But before we go, time now for our big picture tonight. What you're seeing right now are images from Maco in Davao de Oro and Carmen Town in Davao del Norte, which have been severely affected by heavy rains due to the shear line and LPA. Thousands have been left homeless and without provisions as inclement weather continues to affect these provinces. Alagang Kapatid Foundation, along with other NGOs, have made an effort to provide relief to affected residents. Hundreds more, however, are in need of supplies.
To the people who do want to donate, can reach out to Alagang Kapatid Foundation, which is always at the forefront whenever there's natural disasters, right?
And it's just so sad that they're still suffering there.
It's been more than 2 weeks, I believe. Yeah.
Pero umuulan pa rin daw. By the way,
And
before we say
other
goodbye,
bodies hindi pa na-identify.
before we say goodbye, Angela this morning.
Yes, I know. We also wanted to talk about your new show. How was it? How was the first day of your new show?
Very exciting. We had a lot of things to talk about, like here in Big Story. So I'm with Diego. We call him Angelo now. Because we are the
it's the Angelo and Angela's show.
Okay.
Angelo and Angela.
Yeah, so double A. Anyway, so yeah, catch us Monday to Friday. That's 10 a.m. to 11. Join us for brunch. It's more of like top 10 stories for the day.
But I think a lot of people are curious whether it's what it's like to be broadcasting together with your spouse. Hindi ba, is it not weird? Is it not
Just
awkward?
don't bring your issues at home.
Leave your issues at home. On those wise words from Angela, who you can catch
Mondays to Fridays, 10 a.m. brunch.
Right. Here on One News. That's it for the big story tonight. We are
One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.